I just feel like every morning I wake up, I see Baldur's Gate 3 smashing left and right review scores at every single publication because IGN just gave them a 10. Has IGN ever given a game a 10? I don't pay attention to IGN too much, but I know Sven was out there talking about this on Twitter this morning, and I was like, you know what? That's pretty cool. I want to go actually read the article, and it's pretty big and it's pretty in depth. We're going to go through it today in this video, but the highlight here from their image says Baldur's Gate 3 is a landmark moment in the genre with the ideal mix of crunchy, tactical, old school RPG combat combined with an epic and well written story with complex characters and lots of meaningful choices, and a level of polish and cinematic presentation that let me see the sweat and sorrow on characters' faces in their darkest hours. It's so true. We've talked about this in a lot of the live streams, how the mocap that they did for this game, it's not the best mocap we've ever seen, but it's very, very good. And I know Lae'zel as a good example. When I first played Early Access, I didn't care for Lae'zel. And as they improved her facial animations, and they put the sweat on there and the lines and everything else, you could really see the emotion in her face. And I think the scene that got me with her, there's a scene that happens early on in the game when you're at camp and you're sleeping and you wake up in a cold sweat and you're like freaking out about stuff, and here comes Lizelle with a knife and she's ready to, you know, are you turning? Are you changing? And you have this discussion with her, and the emotion in her face comes through as well as with the voice. It's very well done. And I go back to like the old, King's Quest, Quest for Glory games of old, or the old Baldur's Gate 1 and 2 games, and you never got those facial emotions. So it's really cool to see that kind of stuff coming out. And knowing that they built their cinematic studio, their mocap studio from scratch just for this game is another, feather in the cap for Larian Studios as far as I'm concerned. Now, we're going to go dive into this article. It's going to be a bit of a deep read this morning, so hopefully you've got your coffee and you're ready to go. Before we do, though, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon so you never miss an update. We do daily streams at 11 a.m., and we cover a lot more than just Baldur's Gate 3, so check out all the playlists on the channel. Join the Discord, links are down below. And without further ado, let's go read the review. Now, Leanna Haffer, the person who wrote this article, has a tweet out on Twitter which says this is the most time she has ever spent on any individual article in her entire gaming journalism career. And she says this is the best game that she has played since Dragon Age Origins, which I think was 14 or so years ago, which is pretty high praise. Um, I think that if you're someone who's been working in any career long enough, there are watershed moments when you see something that sort of defines the industry or defines a genre. And I think Baldur's Gate 3 has definitely come to define the CRPG genre, and is absolutely worthy of the crown that Baldur's Gate 2 held for many, many years and sort of shared with Dragon Age Origins and, Path of Exile, or not Path of Exile, Pillars of Eternity, Deadfire, so on and so forth. Anyway, I got confused there. Wrong game. Well, let's dive into their article here. It starts off by saying every once in a while a game comes along that is so memorable, exciting, fresh, and well written that it sets a new high watermark for an entire genre. Baldur's Gate 3 is such an achievement for the tabletop role-playing inspired swords and sorcery adventuring that its BioWare-made CRPG predecessors helped popularize decades ago. It's amazing. Heart-wrenching choices, alliances to be forged, bears to be romanced. Be careful if you do that, by the way, everybody's. Oh, and if you're streaming, make sure you've got the nudity and genital stuff turned off. We don't want to get you. We don't want your stream getting hit for any sort of adult content. Um, Said they put in 130 hours on their journey, and said they fell in love with the game over that time. That's a pretty good playthrough. I think yesterday morning before I started my stream, I was right around 47 hours, and I'm up to like session 18 or something on my live streams. I've been live streaming my entire Druid playthrough, and I was estimating the other day that I think it's going to be about 150 hours for me to do my first playthrough. I'm definitely not going to see everything, which is why I'm also playing the Sorcerer and the Bard in the multiplayer sessions as well. For me, knowing that I'm going to get at least 150 hours out of the game is just, it's amazing. And I did say at the very beginning of all of this, I said it's probably going to take me about 3 months to do my entire live stream playthrough. And that looks like it's going to be holding on track so far. It's just really amazing to see how far this game has come and how big it really is and how much choice there is to see here. Um, they say here one issue video games often run into when trying to adapt the experience of playing D&D is that it's almost impossible to achieve the freedom and imagination you get with tabletop. They're comparing this to tabletop and the things that you get when you play tabletop because you can use real world logic and things. And in tabletop, the only limitation is your imagination and the dice rolls. Now, to take what's on paper and translate that into a video game is a much more challenging equation because there are a lot of things that factor in, and not everything that sounds great on paper can actually be transported into the game because of programming limitations as well as technical limitations. But Larian Studios has done a great job at doing that. Um, it says here it's hilarious in other RPGs when you have a spell that can blow an ogre to kingdom come, but it's no match for the might of a wooden gate. And while it's doubtful that any game will ever match that level of flexibility, BG3 is a huge step forward from what we've been able to do in the likes of Skyrim or Dragon Age. Gates aren't enough to stop a determined warlock, which is awesome. If something looks flammable, you can probably set it on fire. If you want to save on lockpicks, start using an axe, or I would also argue the knock spell. The knock spell is amazing. It was amazing in like Baldur's Gate 1 and 2. It's amazing here as well. Like, if you don't have a rogue in your party, who cares? Just keep a knock spell on one of your casters and you'll be fine. Um, Climbing, jumping, the verticality here is a huge thing. Talking about being able to skip a boss fight here by challenging a zombie guy to a drinking contest, and so on and so forth. I think that we've discussed this in our live streams as well, and in some of the videos I've done. The amount of in terms of the options to get out of a fight, like to complete a boss encounter without actually having a fight is really cool. Like I love the ability to have a conversation and still get experience points and do something in different ways, but also then going back. So one of the things you'll see when I do live streams, I will hard save before a lot of the fights we have, or if we go into a boss fight and I've quick saves just before, we will then reload that encounter and try it again a different way on stream. And we'll usually do fights 2, 3, sometimes 4 different ways during a live stream so that I can get all the different permutations that I want to get out of it. And then when I come back and do my solo sorcerer, I see different things. And then when I do it in multiplayer with the bard that I'm playing in that multiplayer group, we see it in a completely different way. So it's been pretty amazing. And I love this part here where they say, this is a world that rarely tells you no. And again, the limitation on this is programming. But with 400 people across multiple studios on an international basis, Larian Studios has managed to take most of the no out of the equation, and they really have offered up not an infinite amount of options, but a much wider array of options than previous games have ever done. So in terms of being able to do all the things you want to do, there's lots of things you can come up with. It's very complex here. They talk about how there's a huge amount of freedom in the world, with the character creator being one of the best they've seen outside of MMOs in a very long time, with 29 different sub races, with abilities and character models at least, and 12 classes. I think they said there was 40. I want to say 43. It might be more off the top of my head, in between the classes and the subclasses, which is pretty amazing. It really, 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 really is awesome. It says the variety of high fidelity performance captured expressive faces is shockingly good. We kind of talked about this at the beginning of this. It says here almost hang on, I'm going to read this section here. Exemplified by the city of Baldur's Gate itself, a hub of life of an adventure that came to awe me anew, even though it took me around 90 hours to even reach the city. Almost every citizen you encounter has something to say about the events around the town, and nosy exploration is consistently rewarded with new lore, new loot, and new quests. It's downright astounding how much voice acting Larian has crammed onto these streets, and how good nearly all of it is, and how good the faces are. I will also say that if you remember, for those of you who played Star Wars: The Old Republic when it came out, that was the game that at the time Star Wars: The Old Republic sort of transformed what a story-based MMO, conversation-based MMO could be because it was fully voiced. And this is I want to say this is one of the, if not the best fully voiced game that I have seen in terms of everybody having something to say since Star Wars: Old Republic. Now, other games have had fully voiced, but not to this level of detail. And I think the mocap, which we mentioned earlier, is part of what transforms this because they put a lot of detail into everything and everybody. There's also your party of companions, which If you have watched the video I did on Baldur's Gate 1 and 2 compared to Baldur's Gate 3, we talk about the legacy of the first two games being, yes, they were the first two games that really transported you into a 3D environment in terms of in terms of Dungeons and Dragons, but also they were renowned for having the best character companions that anyone had ever seen up until that point. The amount of, I would say, conversation options, romance options, and side quests that you could do. And even though Baldur's Gate 1, I think, had a few more companions than Baldur's Gate 2 took the companion system up a notch and gave everybody these massive side quests that were much bigger than the first game. And this one does that in all of its glory. Like, they really have taken the Baldur's Gate 2 model for companion storylines and romances and everything else and kicked it up a notch. And I know I would say the closest thing I can see in recent years has been like maybe Mass Effect 2. Dragon Age Origins was really good, of course, as well. The Pillars of Eternity games 1 and 2 did it really well, but Baldur's Gate 3 has taken all of those ideas and like said, here, we're gonna fully voice it. We're gonna do all these things. We're gonna have all these permutations, and it's crazy, especially when you get into the romance options, which are a little wild in some cases. Um, Main villains are also very well done. Origin characters are interesting, and I think that you have the ability to play through the game as origin characters is also something that speaks to um, its competence in terms of the competition. It says years of Mass Effect memes have proven it's almost impossible to make 3D game videos actually sexy, and Baldur's Gate 3 hasn't changed the game there. We're just not there yet as a society. However, um, it's really, really, really well done, and it says there's so much more, and it's so much better than showing two naked elves awkwardly humping over some unintentionally laughable moon music. Uh, Combat is carefully crafted to make me want to scream at the dungeon master, "You bastard!" And this is where I think that, and they also talk about the tools of the trade here. This is where I think Larian has captured the essence of Dungeons and Dragons more than any other game has done in the past because of all the things you can do in combat. And I will argue with any person who comes at me with all this, well, the Pathfinder games by Owlcut are just so much more complex and more detailed. No, they're not. No, they're not. Great games. I love Owlcat. I cannot wait for Road Trader. I loved Pathfinder Kingmaker. I loved Wrath of the Righteous. They are amazing games, and the Pathfinder system is complex. But what Larian has done here with all of the things you can do in combat is beyond anything I've seen in any other CRPG ever, hands down. Solasta did some really cool things with verticality and jumping and everything else, but Baldur's Gate 3 takes that to a whole nother level with the jumping and the verticality and the shoving and all of the things that you can do, throwing shoes at mobs, picking up NPCs, throwing them at mobs, just using the environment to your advantage and setting things on fire and electrifying things and all of the things that you can do in combat, it really does bring the richness of the mechanics of tabletop gaming to the CRPG format, and it's just brilliantly done. It says here one fight involved teleporting imp creatures before carting them off to separate locations, preventing spell casting. I would also say this is one of the first CRPGs I've ever played that I saw some MMO style mechanics show up at some of the boss fights where there are specific things you need to do in order to get a boss mob down. Talking like the Grim fight with Grimforge, or looking at um, General Ketheric Thorm and what you need to do to get to him, and the Thaniel's Shadow fight. These are the ones that are popping into my head. And things like defending the portal with Halsin, or the Nautiloid fight where you have a countdown timer going on and you have to complete things with a certain amount of time or your party's going to wipe. Really cool stuff going on here in terms of all the things that you're going to be able to do in all of the combat. Um, okay, this is one of the things I will talk about. There are not enough tutorials in the game, and they say here a pretty inadequate set of tutorials that takes a lot of knowledge about D&D for granted. It says here, I know 5th edition well enough that it didn't really trip me up, but I can see where others would completely overlook some critical concepts. Which, by the way, my channel and specifically, one of the things that has helped my channel grow a lot with Baldur's Gate 3 has been the Ultimate Beginner's Guide series, because I know, because I have my spouse who never played any Dungeons and Dragons before we did an actual play series a couple of years back, and she learned 5th edition with us in Fantasy Grounds, playing it live for the first time in a digital format. And so I know the frustration of coming to the table and being a completely new player because she just lived through it. Now, I've been a DM for years and years and years. I've created multiple worlds, sold them, wrote books in them. I've been a professional writer, storyteller for a long time. So I take it for granted sometimes, but I know having that at my side, having her by my side, has made me realize that it's very important to talk about things from a newbie perspective sometimes. And that's one of the areas where I will say, as much as I love this game, they definitely take the whole everybody knows D&D thing a little too far because there's not enough tutorials in the game. But that's also what's allowed my channel to flourish because I do all the beginner's guides and the quick tips and everything else. So nudge, nudge, wink, wink, like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon so you never miss an update. What's up,
Um,
everybody? Quick commercial break here to give it a shout out to our guild champions, who are the highest tier memberships here on YouTube: Ancient Entity, Assassin Gamer 94, Bubbaloni Rising, Crazy's Relative, Mujin, and Remedy. Thanks so much for the highest tier membership, and thanks to all of the members who support the channel because you keep me doing this full time. You too can become a supporter if you're new here. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon so you never miss an update. Join as a member. There's 3 different tiers. We do lots of special stuff, private polls, private videos. You get a shout out if you're the highest tier membership, but you can also do one-off donations in the form of super chats on any live stream or premiere you see, and of course super thanks on any upload or YouTube short. Whatever you can contribute, it's great. Keeps me on the air full time, keeps the cats fed, keeps the homestead running. Anyway, back to the video, everybody. It says here there's a lot of stuff going on. Baldur's Gate 3 doesn't really care to explain them in detail, and you can get by. I would also argue, and they do mention this. I just saw this. You can get by not knowing anything about D&D by playing on Explorer mode because you don't need to know the mechanics if you're on easy mode. But if you want to play on Tactician mode, you better know 5th edition mechanics because if you want to complete the fights without cheesing them, then you're gonna have to know how the spells work, how the resists work, situational mechanics, and all of those other things. Um, Characters and companions take time and experience to develop. I'm level 9 on my characters now, and I feel like by the time we hit 6th level, 7th level, like 6 to 8 felt really good. By the time I hit 8th level, I'm feeling very confident that we could pretty much handle anything we come up against, and they've done a good job with the scaling here. And all the gear you get as well. A World of Wonders. It says the story spans over 3 acts, each of which took around 40 hours to complete, which in many cases is a whole game for a lot of AAA studios, a 40-hour experience. So Baldur's Gate 3 basically making 3 different AAA games in one is pretty freaking amazing. Act 1 is idyllic wilderness, Act 2 is spooky, Act 3 is the dense urban adventuring. And while it can feel slow at times, um, it answers all the right questions until the final set of confrontations. Discovering exciting new areas, strong side quest writing, and consistently fun combat encounters meant I never lost motivation. It says here the really most amazing thing was not how big Baldur's Gate 3 is, or much has been made of its scope. The magic is how almost none of it feels like filler, no matter how far from the main quest you stray. Um, this is key, like being able to create a world that you can live in. I would argue that this is one of the first games I've played since maybe Red Dead Redemption 2 that has the same level of virtual world feel to it, where I honestly feel like anytime I walk into any area, I feel like the people have been living there and they're doing things, and I can see them going about their business and doing things. And that was one of the things that brought Red Dead Redemption 2 to life so well, was how rich and how much time they put into all of the background stuff. And we talked about little things like when you might not notice this at first glance, but if there's like spider webs in the corner and a couple of books laying over there and everything else, when you're running through an area, that kind of stuff might not jump out at you at first glance. But if it wasn't there, you would definitely notice it and you would feel it because it would feel empty. And they have done a very good job at making this game feel like it's alive as opposed to empty. And it's all there for a reason, which is great. It says variations in not only the ending, but also so many other smaller stories have me eager to play it all over again. And this is where I would say the Baldur's Gate franchise, more than any other franchise, apart from maybe Pillars of Eternity and Dragon Age, Mass Effect. What am I talking about? There's lots of good CRPGs out there that I've replayed, but Baldur's Gate 2 in particular for me, I've replayed Baldur's Gate 2 more times than any other game I've ever played. To this day, I just did another Baldur's Gate 2 playthrough, like I think last year, the enhanced edition. Um, and I did Baldur's Gate 1 right before the early access for Baldur's Gate 3 dropped, and that was probably my 12th or 13th replay of Baldur's Gate 1, but I've done Baldur's Gate 2 over 20 times. I've done it so I've done some classes multiple times through the game because they're so much fun. It's just a great game. This game, especially now that I'm doing full-time content creation, the level of replayability here, because you know you're going to get almost, maybe not a completely new experience, but you're going to get a very different experience each time you go through the game based on all of these different things. Just in the 3 playthroughs that I'm doing right now with my Druid, my Sorcerer, and my Bard, I have seen dramatically different things. And I know like Muji and Bubbaluna, who I play multiplayer with, shout out to those guys, follow their channels if you're not already doing so. We stream their sessions on Tuesdays at 3 p.m. Central. Um, those those guys have also, as we're playing together, they're seeing things with their playthroughs that I haven't seen. It's pretty amazing the amount of replayability you're going to get out of this game. Performance options here and there. They're talking about gaming on an RTX 3080 and some performance issues in Act 3. I'm not there yet, so I haven't seen it. I will say though that I'm on an old gaming laptop on a 1080, and if I'm not streaming, I can play the game because I don't use a capture card right now. I just do it all on the same rig. So when I'm running Streamlabs at the same time as playing the game, I've noticed that if I want to have a smooth experience, I tend to drop it down to medium settings. But otherwise, my 1080 can handle this at ultra settings. I did notice some stuff in Act 2 the other day in the Gauntlet of Shar. We caught an area and we were going around it trying to figure out what was causing it, but there was a frame drop happening around a specific area down in that gauntlet where it didn't matter what we were doing and where we were coming at it from. As soon as we were on top of this specific area, the frames would start dropping. So there's definitely some performance issues here and there, but those are things that they're patching in and hot fixing, and they've talked about in the other um, patch notes that they've got. And the verdict here is to say, I don't want every CRPG going forward. Excuse me, I don't want to say every CRPG going forward should aspire to be like Baldur's Gate 3 because not everything needs to be this big and ambitious or even this dense, but it is a landmark moment in the genre. It says if I had to point to one paragon that I would like everyone else making these to take inspiration from, this is absolutely it. I waited 14 years for the stars to align so that we could get the ideal mix of crunchy, tactical, old school RPG combat and an epic and well written story with complex characters and lots of meaningful choices and level of polish and cinematic presentation that let me see the sweat and sorrow on characters' faces even in their darkest hours. Plenty of other games have partially completed that list, but the last time they all together came together for this person was Dragon Age Origins in 2009, and I can finally say that that game and its Infinity Engine predecessors have a worthy successor that's not just matched their RPG greatness, but surpassed it. Baldur's Gate 3 is just about everything else I could have asked for. And of course, they finalized this with a 10, a review score of 10, which, if I'm not mistaken for IGN, that's a perfect score. I don't follow IGN too much, but I'm pretty sure this is if I'm wrong on that, let me know in the comments below if I'm wrong. The point is, I did all that without having more coffee, and now I need more coffee. Guys, you need to go read this review. I just skimmed through it. There's a lot more here. The point is, Baldur's Gate 3 is a masterpiece. I'm having a lot of fun with it. I will be playing this game for years to come, and I can't wait to finish it. But I also am not rushing it. Like I said, I don't even think I've crossed the 50-hour mark through my live streams, and I play it every single day. It's a big game. There's lots of replayability. It's amazing. There are hiccups here and there, some performance issues, some bugs I see, but that doesn't take away from it having a 10 out of 10. And watching PC Gamer give it a 97 the other day, and now IGN give it a 10, I know that the people at Larian Studios genuinely feel like all their hard work is paid off, and I, for one, am glad to see this happen. Love to hear your thoughts. Drop them down in the comments below. Please like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update. I'm streaming live every day at 11 a.m. Central with the multi-stream sessions, multiplayer sessions on Tuesdays at 3 p.m. There's a Discord. Links are down below. Support if you can with memberships, super chats, and beyond. And hopefully I'll see everybody in the next video. Until then, stay safe, everybody. Happy gaming, and let's explore Faerun even more.